couldn't stop thinking about strawberry mochi ice cream since I finished my last batch a few days ago. And since it's summer and berries are so good right now, I decided to take full advantage of that. Started by chopping up my strawberries and letting them sit with some sugar while I got started on my ice cream base. I combined some milk, heavy cream, vanilla, some sugar, and gave that a really good mix. I set that aside, blended up my strawberries, and then combined that with my milk mixture. Once that was all incorporated, I chilled that for about an hour before pouring it into my ice cream churner and letting it churn for about 20 to 25 minutes. Once it reached soft serve consistency, I spooned it into my tray, popped that in the freezer for about 4 hours. Once it was completely frozen, I scooped tiny little balls onto this baking tray and let those freeze while I got started on making my mochi dough. I combined some glutinous rice flour, cornstarch, some powdered sugar, and some water. I wanted my mochi to be pink, so I added some pink color to it before heating it up, and once it came together, I rolled it out and then took a cookie cutter to get perfect round circles to spoon my ice cream into. I pulled my ice cream out of the freezer in batches so that it wouldn't melt, placed my tiny scoops inside the mochi, and then wrapped it all around. The ones I was eating immediately I put on a plate while the others went back into the freezer. This was absolutely divine and hit the spot. Mango sticky rice is all I can think about, and after ordering it and getting the tiniest portion, I just decided to make it myself. We buy a lot of mangoes when they're in season, so I started off by making some mango ice cream. I diced up my mango, added them to a blender with some sweetener and lemon, gave that a good blend, then combined some heavy cream, milk, and some sugar, added my mango puree, and let that chill in the fridge before transferring it over to my ice cream churner. I churned it for about 20 to 30 minutes until it reached a soft serve consistency, and then I popped that in the freezer while I got started on my sticky rice. I had the rice soaking the night before and added it to my steamer. I let that steam while I started on my coconut sauce that was going to go in with the rice, which was coconut milk and some sweetener and a pinch of salt. Once my rice was finished steaming, I added my coconut milk to it, covered it, and just let it sit while I made thicker coconut sauce to go on top of the rice. I let that reduce on the stove while I finished up prepping all of my other things, which was slicing some mango, and by this time my rice had soaked up all of that coconut milk, so it was time to plate. I put down my rice, added my mango, added some of that coconut cream on top with some sesame seeds, and then obviously had to pull out my mango ice cream. The cold ice cream went perfectly with the warm rice, and this was absolutely divine. My husband mentioned that he was craving Coca-Cola the other day, and since we were out of soda, I decided to make him some today. I started by making my caramel sugar by combining some water and sugar, letting that come to the hard crack stage before pouring it out and letting it cool. Once it was all cooled down, I broke it up and set it aside and moved on to zesting my citrus. I started by zesting some oranges, some lemon, and lastly, I also zested some lime. I moved on to grinding up all of my spices. I started by combining some nutmeg, cinnamon, some vanilla, coriander seeds, rose hips, some lime leaves, and some kola nut. Before grinding that into a fine powder, I combined the last round of ingredients, which were some water with different sugars, the citrus that we zested earlier, and we can't forget about our citric and malic acid, and also the caramel sugar we made earlier. I set that into a water bath and let that all come together for about an hour and a half on the stove before straining it through a fine mesh strainer. I popped that in the fridge until it was cold, and then it was time to have our soda. I combined some cola syrup with sparkling water, and this tasted exactly like Coke. And when I made Lucky a glass, he was so impressed that he had to have another glass after. My husband loves a spicy snack, so when he said he was craving flaming hot Cheetos today, I decided to make him some instead of him having to go to the store. I cooked my polenta, spread that out, let that cool for about 2 hours before adding it to a food processor alongside some egg whites, baking powder, cayenne, garlic, and then I gradually added in some cornstarch. Once it was a thick paste, I piped it onto my cutting board that was dusted with some arrowroot powder before I cut that up and formed them into some Cheeto-like shapes. I set those aside while my oil heated up, and once it was hot enough, I fried them until they were golden brown, transferred them over to a wire rack before popping that in the oven and letting that bake on my lowest heat setting for about 4 to 5 hours, just until it was crisp crispy and dried out. It was almost time to pull out my Cheetos. I started on making both my seasoning mixes. I decided to go with the original cheese flavor and then the flaming hot one. I tossed my Cheetos in both of the seasonings, and Lucky obviously went for the hot ones first, which were gone in less than 10 minutes.